Hello, my name is Shelby Reynolds. I am a member of Team 3, and the topic we are going to be discussing today is international trade theories and policies. My teammates are Lauren, Grant, Alex, Sophia, and Zach. The focus of our discussion will be regarding trade policies between the United States and China. The trade policies established between the United States and China are an important concern because China is one of the top trading partners of the United States, as depicted by the graph, America's most important trading partners. So the decisions made regarding trade policies between these two countries greatly impacts their citizens and economic development. Additionally, this topic is important because the United States has recently switched to a new presidential administration, the Biden administration. The previous administration enforced some strict trade restrictions on China, and now that there is a new administration, now is the time for China to plead for the lift of these restrictions and for the two countries to improve their relationship. Furthermore, it is important to understand the standstill the U.S. has taken with the World Trade Organization and how the new administration will act regarding the national security issue. The first article we chose is Biden Picks Up Where Trump Left Off in Hardline Stances at World Trade Organization, was published on February 22nd by Bloomberg, a highly credible news source. And this article discusses the events that resulted from the Trump administration's decision that exports from Hong Kong be labeled as made in China. The second article is titled China Urges U.S. to Lift Trade Restrictions, Stop Interference, was published on February 21st by the Washington Post, another highly credible news source. And this article discusses the request China has made to President Biden regarding the current limitations on people-to-people interactions and trade restrictions, such as the increased tariffs on imports from China and the Chinese tech companies and academic exchange restrictions that were put in place in 2017 by the previous administration. We chose these two articles because while they are both focused on the China and U.S. trade relationship, they both discuss two current, separate issues that provide us with a more diverse perspective on the United States and China trade relationship. Furthermore, by reading both of these articles as opposed to just reading one of them, we better understand chapters 5 and 6 of the textbook because the chapter topics are brought to life through the real-world examples of international trade policies. Further, both articles provide us with an insight on the approach the Biden administration will be using to handle international trade and World Trade Organization related issues. Now I'm going to hand it over to my teammate Alex, who will be summarizing each article's main points.
So this first article goes on to discuss the ongoing dispute between the World Trade Organization, WTO, and its members. The author states that President Joe Biden backs the previous administration's decision to label Hong Kong exports as made in China. The article goes on to emphasize that the WTO granted Hong Kong dispute inquiry and the decision could take up to 3 years. The article also indicates that in 2018, a law was passed to justify tariffs on foreign imports of steel and aluminum. Furthermore, the article specified that the Biden administration will not be appointing new members to the WTO appellate body due to systemic concerns. Lastly, the article states that the United States Trade Representative, Katherine Tai, will be working with the WTO Director General, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, on dispute settlements. The second article goes on to discuss China's urgency to have the United States lift its trade restrictions and stop interference. China has asked the Biden administration to lower tariffs on imports that former President Donald Trump adopted. China has also urged the new administration to lift the bans and restrictions on Chinese tech companies and to lift its sanctions on Chinese educational exchanges. While Biden has agreed to take a more civil tone, Washington is aware of its trade record, territorial disputes with neighbors, and accusations of technology theft and spying. The article mentions Wang Wenbin, who is the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson. He encourages increased dialogue with the United States, but did not offer any direct proposals. Additionally, Wang outlined 3 main issues on which the United States could cooperate: the COVID-19 pandemic, climate change, and the global economic recovery. Furthermore, spokesperson Hu Xinyang condemned the United States by contrasting its handling of the Texas climate disaster to the robust social and economic interactions seen in China. Now I'm going to hand it off over to my teammate Sophia, who will be discussing the similarities and differences between the two articles.
The similarities between the two articles from Bloomberg and the Washington Post, they both discuss President Biden's approach to international trade and the World Trade Organization, WTO. After President Joe Biden was inaugurated, he published his foreign policy agenda in an effort to change or resolve former President Donald Trump's actions. The articles mentioned the tariffs enacted by the Trump administration on foreign imports, particularly with China. The last similarity between the two articles is that they justify the United States' role while they assess their foreign trade policy. Next is the differences. In our first article published by Bloomberg, it differs from the Washington Post article because it goes more in detail about the World Trade Organization, WTO, involvement in the international trade system. For instance, the WTO's appellate body, a 7-member panel of experts who until 2019 had the final say on trade disputes involving billions of dollars worth of international commerce. Also, in this article, it frequently mentions the basis of national security since the United States has invoked the WTO national security exception. This could encourage other nations to pursue protectionist policies. Lastly, the Trump administration's decisions critically damaged WTO's dispute settlement system, and as a result, the Biden administration would not appoint new members to WTO's appellate body due to systematic concerns. Our next difference is in our second article published by the Washington Post. It differs from the Bloomberg article because it expresses China's concern over Trump's restrictions placed on trade. Trump hiked tariffs on Chinese imports in 2017 and imposed bans and other restrictions on Chinese tech companies and academic exchanges. Now that President Biden has taken office, he and other Chinese diplomats want to push efforts to strengthen China-U.S. relations. Ideally, President Biden believes in coordinating an approach to negotiations with China that utilizes U.S. allies and international institutions, to which the Chinese diplomats addressed that China is ready to peacefully coexist and seek common development with the United States. What we have learned from both articles is that in Article 1, the Trump administration triggered a Cold War-era law to justify tariffs on foreign imports that caused U.S. trade partners to file disputes at the WTO. The Trump administration also refused to consider nominees for the panel of the appellate body at the WTO, which broke precedent since there weren't enough to sign off on new rulings. Lastly, the Biden administration is trying to alleviate national security disputes, which are not subject to WTO review because it would infringe on a member's right to determine what is in its own security interest. Then in Article 2, Foreign Minister Wang Yi hopes that U.S. policymakers will bring the China policy back to reason to ensure a healthy, steady development of China-U.S. relations. Then President Biden encourages competition with China, and he believes in the global system. Europe and the United States, together with our allies in the Indo-Pacific, worked so hard to build over the last 70 years. Also, China wants the restrictions that were placed by Trump to be lifted for both trade and media. I will now hand it over to my team member, Zach.
Hello, so I'm relating the Article 1 to our textbook, and I found our information in 6.4. The first thing it discusses the World Trade Organization, and the goals are to help the free flow of trade, negotiate further opening markets, and settle trade disputes among its members. One key component is that the WTO that was carried over from the GATT is the principle of non-discrimination called trade relations. The next point is the protection of U.S. securities. and I found that Trump's administration's decision to label Hong Kong experts as made in China and said that the WTO had no right to mediate the matter because the organization's rules permit countries to take any action to protect their essential security interests. And the last one is free flow of trade. And this allows firms to move production to locations that maximize efficiency. Government interference in the free flow of trade has implications for production efficiency and firm strategy. The article discusses the U.S. delegation to the World Trade Organization, and some of the points that I have are that the Biden administration will not appoint new members to the WTO appellate body due to systematic concerns. So this again comes with security for us in the U.S. And the last point is that the Trump administration and the Biden administration refused to fill vacancies to the WTO appellate body despite settlement system has been paralyzed.
Here, I will be discussing how our second article relates to things that can be found in our course materials. I found that section 6.1 of our textbook talks about reasons that governments often impose restrictions on free trade. Those reasons can be political, economical, or cultural. Here, we will be focusing on political motives, which include protecting jobs, preserving national security, responding to unfair trade practices, and gaining influence over other nations. Our article mentioned how Trump imposed bans and other restrictions on Chinese tech companies in 2017 due to concerns about the imbalance in trade and accusations of technology theft and spying. Because of this, the government felt the need to get involved and put restrictions in place in response to unfair trade practices and in order to protect the United States. I will now hand it over to my team member, Grant.
Thank you. Key takeaway 1. The first key takeaway is that China and the United States are willing to work together. They do have their differences in politics, ideas, and government, but both sides have stated that they are willing to work out a deal. While this is true, it looks like it will take some time for them to come to terms. Each side is adamant about their demands and what they want. They do not want to give up any power. The Biden administration is taking a different approach to this matter compared to Trump's administration. This doesn't necessarily mean that the Biden administration will come to terms with China, but they are willing to listen more than the Trump administration did. While this isn't much progress, it is more progress than Trump's administration had established. Key takeaway 2. The second key takeaway is that the United States will keep their firm stance with the World Trade Organization. The United States still believes that the World Trade Organization has no right to be involved in the matter because their members would protect their own personal security interests. The United States believes this could impact their own national security. While some had hoped the Biden administration would be more willing to work with the World Trade Organization, they are holding the same stance as previous administrations. There have been concerns over the past 16 years, specifically with frustration towards the World Trade Organization's appellate body. The Biden administration recently stated they would not be appointing new members to the appellate body. Key takeaway 3. The third key takeaway is that the United States and China are world leaders. They dominate in production, military force, trade, and technology. China has the largest population in the world, while the United States is third in world population. Their actions affect millions and possibly even billions of people. Both sides are not going to jump in a deal just to get one done. They will both try to maximize their benefits to the absolute fullest. The United States likes dominating the Western Hemisphere, and China likes dominating the Eastern Hemisphere. No side is going to give in. So, this brings us to our conclusion. While China and the United States are willing to work together, it's looking like it may take some time. Each side is stubborn and waiting for someone to make the first move. While this may not seem like progress, it is progress compared to how Trump's administration previously worked with China. Both nations want the World Trade Organization to stay out of the matter. Both nations have stated concerns with the World Trade Organization and they want to do things their own way. Our last point, both nations realize that they are world leaders and their actions have great impact. Each decision can impact millions, so every detail of a potential deal will be looked over dozens of times before coming to terms. While they are willing to work together, they are not willing to give up much.